I'm Teresa Carraggio, and this is Third Paradigm. Today, I'm responding to Simulation Commander, who writes the wonderful Screaming into the Void, complete with delightful cat memes and following his own delightful cats. So this I'm calling the Intoxication of Power and its Antidote. And this came from one of his recent posts where he says, as the man in my avatar famously said, "But always, do not forget this, Winston, always there will be the intoxication of power, constantly increasing and growing subtler. Always, at every moment, there will be the thrill of victory, the sensation of trampling on an enemy who is helpless. If you want a picture of the future, imagine a boot stomping on a human face forever." I don't believe that's true, and neither does Simulation Commander. I think that we're entering into a time of detoxification, a time when we have the tonic antidote to power over others, and that's the kind of power that's intoxicating. And what's the antidote? I believe that the antidote is wanting only power over ourselves. That is trickier than you think it is, because we live in a culture where we only survive through the power of money, through our power over other people, what I call empire privilege, the ability to consume without producing. That's something that Charles Eisenstein talked about recently on one of his posts. The article Charles wrote was called Notes on Privilege, and it was from a talk that he gave at Regeneration International. He makes the point that privilege is when you don't need relationships in your life if you have money, that money can replace all of your need for relationships. Now, I agree with that in principle, but I object to the use of the word privilege. He also makes the point that in a society in which privilege is required in order to live, that it's better to have it than to not have it. But if it's required, is that actually privilege? And have we gotten to a point where I wonder sometimes whether all of our relationships have been monetized? And if you look at all of the people that you interact with on a daily basis, how many of those relationships are transactional? Do you ever wonder, okay, these people I chat with all the time at the farmer's market, if I didn't have them money, would they give me food? If I didn't have a place to live, would anyone take me in? If I didn't have this customer relationship, would this person still be nice to me? I think that those are things that make us all, at some level, question our actual relationships. And it's not the fault of the people with whom we have those, because they've been put into a position where money is how you survive. And you can't afford to give your time or give whatever product you have away for free, because all of the time you can possibly spend is spent getting money. What Simulation Commander is talking about in a recent series is AI, and how AI is replacing all of those jobs of the dwindling middle class and squeezing the last bit of life out of ways to actually make a living. And it's affecting people like low-wage service workers, where customer service can be replaced by AI. It's affecting doctors who are being replaced by AI. And it's affecting people like him who have been content creators. Now, my daughter works for an agency that hires content creators, and it's a gig economy. It's a way in which someone can be pulled in and be able to do this kind of advertising that then hopefully can make it on the web. But the algorithms and the ways that they're rigged has been, again, squeezing this last little bit of juice out of that market, so that small businesses are failing right and left. For my daughter's agency, they are not bringing in new accounts, and all of these small businesses are finding they can't afford to put money into marketing, because there's something I don't understand about how you bid. And if your content is good enough, maybe it'll get promoted. But if it's not, then you've just spent money on nothing. So there's been this gradual progression where the employees with benefits and retirement of a former generation have been turned into contractors, and people have said, oh, this is great. You can make more money. You can work from home. Isn't that terrific? And then the next squeeze was they got turned into a gig economy where there's not even a long-term contract. There's no relationship. There's only grabbing here, grabbing there, and doing what they do in Nigeria with hustle economy. That's the world that we're living in right now, and even that is being squeezed. So something that I've been seeing a lot on Substack is people saying, I need to figure out a way to make it. I have Naomi Wolf who said, gee, I have a lot of subscribers, but I only have 2,400 who are paying subscribers. I need more people to subscribe. So even Naomi Wolf, at whatever that comes to, at $50 a person, is saying, I can't live on that, and looking for ways to be able to trade more money among ourselves. Now, I'm not faulting anyone for that, because everybody needs to figure out, how do we get through this transition? What I am saying, though, is let's figure out where we want to go after the transition. Something that's going to work for everyone. And then we can maybe feel better about doing these things in the interim to get us from here to there. But first, I want to talk about a couple of solutions that are not really long-term solutions, even though they're nice things to do. And one of those is buying local and making sure that we are trading money around as much as possible, as close as we can to home. And I am in complete agreement with that principle, and that's entirely what my book and my system, How to Dismantle an Empire, is based around. But in it, I talk about Michael Schumann, who developed the multiplier effect. And what he says is that when you shop close to home, that 68% of your money stays local. Now, I go through why that's not actually true. That first, you end up having 39% of that going into various forms of taxes, especially if you're a small business owner, which means that you're paying both sides of your Social Security. So you're paying that full 15%, and then you're paying for all the other taxes on top of it. And then you have 27% that's going for housing. And that housing may go to a local landlord, but then it's generally going for the mortgage. So it goes very quickly right back to the bankers who have caused the problem in the first place. And then you have insurances, and those insurances are going to take up at least another 15%. So you have what Michael Hudson calls the FIRE economy: finance, insurances, and real estate. And here now in California, you can't even get homeowner insurance for a new home. So if you wanted to rebuild, like those 85% of people who weren't able yet to rebuild out in the countryside where the fires have made them lose their homes, you can't do that because you can't get insurance on it. And they're now looking at passing a bill in the assembly saying that you won't even legally be able to do it, even without insurance, because they say, well, then we'll have to cover it because there's a law that says that we have to cover it if you can't get other insurance, and we can't afford to do that. So people, you just all have to live in the cities, and only if the cities are not able to meet their quotas for how many people they can cram in those 5-story buildings they're allowed to now put in any neighborhood, then at that point we might allow you to expand. So in my book I show how if you have $100 within 3 different iterations of changing hands, it turns into $1.20. And the rest of that all gets sucked out of the economy and goes to the exact people that we don't want to support. And when I linked my book, Simulation Commander wrote, "Oh, you're famous." And I said, "Are you making fun of me?" And he said, "No, I see your name right there on the cover and you have an ISBN number and everything." And so that did my heart good that another writer would actually feel like I was a real person because I have a real book. And then the other thing that came up in the comment thread was universal basic income. I have 2 practical considerations. I know that there are a lot of concerns about how that is going to enslave us and make us dependent on this social credit score, and those are valid too. But here are 2 reasons that I don't see that working. One is that the cost of living is relative. And right now, I know applying for a rental, you need to show that it's no more than 30% of your income. So whatever additional income you have is going to be sucked right into making the cost of living higher because it's always going to cost as much as anyone can afford. And then the second reason I don't see it working is because universal basic income isn't actually universal. The only reason that it works is that there are producer nations who are not part of that system. And if they need dollars and you're getting dollars for free, that means that you can get the products that they make. As someone once said, the United States makes dollars and the rest of the world makes things that dollars can buy. But at this point, that ain't going to be true for much longer. You have all of these producer nations who are joining as the BRICS nations and who are forming their own oil bourse and who are flushing those dollars out of their systems as quickly as possible without hurting their own economic status. And so I don't think that we're going to be able to be consumers who don't produce, who don't have anything in trade. And the nations that are looking at UBI are entirely services labor forces. We're not producers. We exchange services with each other, and then we get money for that, and that money is able to take the things away from producers without giving them any of our labor in return. One of the commenters on SimCom Stack, Timothy Staples, responded to my comment saying, yes, that what we need to do is go back to where every person is the owner of any of the assets that their labor produces. And I think that what he said is absolutely key, that every person should own the product of their own labor. But the product of resources or money that's made from money should always belong to the community. So those are the 2 things that I look at in my book. And I look at how we could create that by taking back ownership of the houses. That the houses are not something that anyone in general is building. They're a legacy. They're what we've inherited from the previous generation. And so it's not right that we should just be able to move in and say, okay, that's mine now, and that's done. I don't have anything that I need to give back to that previous generation who built the infrastructure, who made the land more fertile, who created all of the things that I have. No, I don't need to pass anything on to the next generation. I can just say, okay, this is all mine now. That's not right. We do owe a debt, but we owe a debt to pass that on. So what my system does is that it takes that and all the money that comes in from mortgages and also from student debt and turns it into something that we can then generate into the community, but not as UBI, as something that doesn't give you anything until you give it to someone else in response for their labor. And so every time that exchanges, it just gets stronger. And if it exchanges locally, it doesn't end up slipping away because the bankers don't own the mortgages. We do. Our communities do. And therefore, every exchange means that there's more productive labor, and you own that. And we as a community are able to share in the ways in which money is made from money. And in relationship to that, in response to my last post on Malone and Slaughterhouse 4, Gabrielle of Libre Solutions Networks wrote, "This entire post has partially been inspired by what appears to be the most important piece on Substack at the moment, Malone and Slaughterhouse 4. Teresa correctly points out that the goal of controlled opposition is to lead people back into the slaughterhouse. She gives many examples of signs to look out for. I am very distressed that the assault on the public during the COVID years has gone essentially unpunished, causing serious harm to people of all walks of life. If there was ever a time to be seriously critical of one's allies, I can't think of a better time. I've written before that it's not what you say but how you say it, and Teresa Carraggio succeeds to be factual, firm, but not inflammatory. This is something I would love to learn from. Thank you, Gabriel." And then he continues, "I have serious problems with any technological approach that isn't primarily centered on education, reform, and empowerment." So this has brought a whole new group of very technical people to my site. And that's so exciting for me because I think that technology is what we need to be able to imagine and to test our economic systems for what we want to see locally. And that, of course, is all something I spell out in my book. But putting that into models that we can play with, that we can have fun with, that we can develop, let's say, a paradigm for here's how I would handle homeowner insurance. This is how I'd handle this. And be able to say, okay, let me plug your module into my system and let's see how that works. Let me kludge from your system. Let me add to yours. And being able to have something that would be a cooperative community economy building group so that we can all be sharing and just getting our ideas out there in a way that would be fun. So thank you, Simulation Commander, for all the thought-provoking articles and all the heartwarming cat memes. And I hope we can continue this conversation of dreaming together, of what's the world that we want to see, what's the economy that we want to create in somewhere that no one is ever subjected again to the gig economy where you have to sell your soul in order to have a roof over your head. To follow up, I'm going to recommend 5 feminine economies for different models for different functions that I think could work, and also what is the greater reset about another model that I think is a fine thing to do but will not solve the problem. Thank you for watching.